So I would like to start my presentation. Can you hear me, my voice clearly? No problem?
Yes,
No.
we can hear you. No problem.
Okay, okay, thank you very much. So, respected Dr. Ashok Hans, distinguished members of the Ashok Memorial Committee, the leadership and staff of the Shanta Memorial Rehabilitation Center, and my fellow brothers and sisters with disabilities in India and around the world, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening from Japan, where it is now 10 o'clock on Saturday night. That we can gather like this across continents without anyone boarding an aircraft is one of the quiet miracles of the digital age. And tonight, I want to talk about who built this, this miracle, who is still excluded from it, and who must lead its next chapter. It is a profound honor to deliver this memorial lecture and to join the distinguished line of activists from across our region who have delivered it before me. I note with emotion that the first lecture in this series was given by Mansoor Ahmed Chowdhury on the 18th of July 2010. The 16 years ago to this very day, and that among the past lecturers is Anuradha Mohit, with whom I have worked side by side in India, in Paris, and in Tunis, in the common struggle for the right to information for all.
I can't do anything with it.
Mansoor closed that first lecture with a vow that our journey from darkness to light, from dissolution to hope, from exclusion to inclusion, would attain its goal of a rights-based, barrier-free, and inclusive society for all. Tonight, I would like to examine that vow in the light of the digital age and to ask what it demands of us now. But first, let me pay my tribute to the man whose memory brings us together. Ashok Hans devoted his life from 1985 until his passing in 2008 to the proposition that disability rights are rights, not charity, not welfare, not an afterthoughts of development, but rights. He founded the Shanta Memorial Rehabilitation Center in Bhubaneswar. I hope my pronunciation is right or acceptable, and built it into an institution known across India and across the world. He traveled from rural Odisha to the corridors of the United Nations to carry a simple message. Persons with disabilities must make informed choices about their own aspirations and destinies, like any other persons. Those who worked with him remember a warm, caring, ever smiling man. But I would like to draw your attention to something else in his legacy, something that speaks directly to my theme tonight. Ashok Hans was among the early voices calling for the inclusion of disability in disaster response, a campaign SMRC carried to the globe stage. He understood long before it became international policy, that when the cyclone comes, when the flood rises, the barriers that exclude us in ordinary times become deadly. I'll return to this insight later because I believe it is one of the most important lessons Odisha has given the world. And Ashok Hans understood something more, that the expertise for removing barriers lies in the people who face them. SMRC has always been a disability-led organization. In particular, participated in the drafting of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and India's own disability laws. That is to say, persons with disabilities in Odisha did not wait for accessible systems to be handed down to them. They went and wrote the rules themselves. Tonight's theme, the role of persons with disabilities in the development of universal design, is in a sense simply the story of people like Ashok Hans, told in the language of technology. Let me now frame the question of this lecture. Universal design, as defined in Article 2 of the CRPD, means the design of products, environments, programs, and services to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the needs for adaptation or specialized design. It is a beautiful idea, but there is a question hidden inside it that is rarely asked aloud. Designed by whom? For most of modern history, technology has been designed for persons with disabilities at best and without us at worst. The results are all around us. Lamps added after the building is finished, websites fixed after the lawsuit, apps that a blind user discovers on the day of release cannot be operated at all. This is the design first, retrofit later model. And in the digital age, it fails faster and at greater scale than ever before because software reaches a billion people before anyone thinks to test it with a screen reader. The disability movement's answer has always been contained in 5 words. Nothing about us without us. But tonight, I want to argue for a stronger formulation. Our role is not merely to be consulted, not merely to test, not merely to advise. The lesson of the last 30 years, and I have been fortunate to witness some of it at first hand, is that persons with disabilities must be and have already proven ourselves to be the developers, the standard makers, and the leaders of universal design. When we lead, universal design succeeds, and the whole of society benefits. When we are excluded, accessibility decays into a compliance checkbox. That is my thesis. Let me offer you the evidence of my own lifetime. I began my career in 1970 as a librarian at the University of Tokyo Library, where I served for 27 years. A library is a temple of knowledge, but I came to see that its doors were closed to a great many people. Blind readers, readers with low vision, people with dyslexia, people who could not hold a book or turn its pages. For them, the shelves might as well have been empty. Later, as chair of the section of libraries for the blind of the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, in the first half of the 1990s, I saw that this exclusion was global and that it was most severe in the developing world, where fewer than a few percent of published works ever became available in accessible formats. We came to call this the book famine. In those days, the talking book was an analog cassette tape. Imagine studying for an examination with a textbook on 12 cassettes, with no way to jump to a chapter, no way to find a page, no way to place a bookmark. They needed navigation, the power to move through a book as freely as a sighted reader flips pages. In 1996, 6 talking book libraries and library consortiums came together to form the DAISY Consortium. DAISY currently stands for the Digital Accessible Information System, but at that time, it stood for the Digital Audio-Based Information System. I had the privilege of serving on its board from the founding as interim project manager in the first years, later as project manager of the DAISY for All project, bringing the technology to developing countries, and as president from 2008 till 2011. But the titles do not matter. What matters is how the standard was made. From the first day, blind readers and other persons with print disabilities were not the test subjects of the DAISY. They were literally its architects. The requirements that defined the entire standard, precise navigation by chapter, section, page, and phrase, with text, audio, and images synchronized, did not come from engineers guessing what blind people might want. It came from blind readers stating what they required, and engineers, many of them themselves persons with disabilities, building to that requirement. The user organizations governed the consortium itself. The specification was open, non-proprietary, free for anyone in the world to implement because the member libraries, accountable to their readers, insisted that access to knowledge must never be locked behind the patent. And here is the point I most want you to hear. DAISY did not remain a special technology for a special population. The concept pioneered in DAISY, structured navigation, synchronized text and audio, reading by ear and eye together if necessary, flowed directly into EPUB, the mainstream standard, which is the mainstream standard on which the world's e-book are built, and into today's international requirements for born accessible publishing. Features demanded by blind readers in the 1990s are now used by commuters listening to novels, by children learning to read, by elderly readers enlarging text on their tablets, by anyone who has ever asked a device to read aloud. The whole world now reads the way we said books should work. This is the deepest pattern of the universal design in the digital age, repeated over and over. The curve cut, designed for wheelchair users, serves every parent with a pram and every traveler with a suitcase. The subtitle, created for deaf viewers, is switched on in every waiting room of a hospital, sports bar, and airport, and by millions watching films in a second language. The keyboard interface, the voice assistant, predictive text, optical character recognition, each has roots in assistive technology. Persons with disabilities are not the beneficiaries of the universal design. We are its research and development department, and we have been all along, usually unpaid and usually uncredited. A standard alone, however, doesn't end a famine. Law must follow.
Yes.
And here I want to acknowledge India's leadership before this Indian audience. In June 2013, the world adopted the Marrakesh Treaty, which requires copyright exemptions so that accessible format copies of books can be made and shared across borders. It is often called the treaty that ends the book famine. The disability movement fought for it for years against powerful commercial resistance. And it was fitting that in 2014, the very first country in the world to ratify the Marrakesh Treaty was India. The leadership was not an accident of diplomacy. It grew from decades of work by Indian organizations of the blind and print disabled, by the Daisy Forum of India and its member organizations, who built accessible book production capacity across the country, and then demanded the legal framework to match. Today, India's online accessible library connects Indian readers with print disabilities to hundreds of thousands of titles, linked to global collection through the Accessible Books Consortium. Indian advocates did not wait for universal design to arrive from somewhere else. They built it, and then they changed the international law to protect it. When I say that persons with disabilities are the developer of universal design, India is one of my proofs. Let me now turn to the field where Ashok Hans was pioneer and universal design cases to be a matter of convenience and becomes a matter of life and death, disaster. The statistics are brutal in their simplicity. In disaster after disaster, the mortality rate of persons with disabilities is estimated at twice that of the general populations, and sometimes far higher. In the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami of March 2011, this was documented with terrible clarity. Warnings that cannot be heard by deaf people, evacuation maps that cannot be read by blind people, shelters that cannot be entered by wheelchair users, procedures that panic rather than protect people with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities. Every inaccessible link in the chain becomes a cause of death. But I carry with me also a story of hope from the same day, and I would like to share it with you because I witnessed the preparation behind it. From 2003, colleagues and I worked with a community in Urakawa, a small town on the Pacific coast of Hokkaido in northern Japan. Urakawa is home to a remarkable community of persons with severe psychosocial disabilities living in the community. Together, not for them, but with them, we developed disaster preparedness materials in accessible multimedia formats using the DAISY technology I have described, with synchronized text, audio, and images that each person could study at their own pace as many times as they wished. The community members themselves decided what the materials should say, filmed their own evacuation drills, studied their own escape routes to high grounds, and rehearsed year after year. They were not the object of the preparedness plan. They were its authors. On the 11th of March 2011, the earthquake struck, and a tsunami of more than 3 meters high hit Urakawa. On that day, the community members with psychosocial disabilities didn't wait to be rescued. More than 60 of them led the stream of evacuees to higher ground. In Urakawa, not one life was lost. Persons whom society had labeled as the most vulnerable, the least capable, the ones to be managed in an emergency, walked at the front of the evacuation. Preparation, designed by the people concerned, turned so-called vulnerability into leadership. The lesson entered global policy step by step. And here I must speak of a chapter of the story in which our host tonight played her own part. We carried the message first to the Global Forum on Disability in the Information Society at the World Summit on the Information Society in Geneva in 2003 and in Tunis in 2005. Then after the tragic experiences of the great disasters of our region, above all the Great East Japan earthquake of 2011, the disability movement across Asia and the Pacific worked through UN SCAP to build a consensus that implementing Article 11 of the CRPD on situations of risk required nothing less than making disability inclusive disaster risk reduction, DIDRR in short, a foundation of the world's disaster strategy. And so, 1 year before the third UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in April 2014, SCAP, Rehabilitation International, and the Nippon Foundation co-hosted in the city of Sendai the Asia-Pacific Meeting on Disability Inclusive Disaster Risk Reduction under the banner Changing Mindsets Through Knowledge. I had the honor of serving as project manager of that undertaking, and among those who carried it to success was Dr. Ashok Hans herself. As a member of Rehabilitation International's Task Force on Disaster Risk Reduction, bringing to it the experience of India and of SMRC, the field Ashok Hans had pioneered. The mindset change we resolved to bring to the World Conference was expressed in 4 words: from liability to asset. Persons with disabilities are not a liability to be managed when disaster strikes. We are an asset, agents and designer of the universal design of disaster risk reduction. And when the nations of the world adopted the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction in March 2015, that change of mindset was written into it. Persons with disabilities and our organizations are explicitly recognized as stakeholders in the design and implementation of disaster risk reduction, the first global disaster framework to say so. I'm proud of that achievement, and tonight, speaking as a guest of SMRC, I'm glad to acknowledge before her own community the part Dr. Hans played in it. And Odisha, of all places, understands this. This state lost some 10,000 lives to the super cyclone of 1999, and then astonished the world in 2013 when Cyclone Pylene struck, and mass evacuation kept the death toll in the tens rather than thousands. Odisha proved that preparedness saves lives. The next frontier, the one SMRC works on through its program on disasters and climate change, the one Ashok Hans campaigned for, is to ensure that this life-saving machinery of warning, evacuation, and shelter is universally designed. Early warning in accessible formats, in sign language and easy-to-read language, evacuation plans made with persons with disabilities in every village, shelters that everyone can enter and use with dignity. As climate change makes the Bay of Bengal more dangerous, decade by decade, disability inclusive disaster risk reduction is not a specialized welfare topic. It is the sharpest test of whether our society's system are truly designed for all, and it must be led by persons with disabilities, because Urakawa teaches us that the community that designs its own survival survives. Now, let me speak of the present moment and of the technologies reshaping all our lives. I have lived through several technological revolutions: the cassette, the CD, the personal computer, the internet, the smartphone. I say to you with full seriousness that technology of the current decade, above all artificial intelligence, carry the greatest potential for the inclusion of persons with disabilities that I have seen in more than 50 years of work. A blind person today can point a telephone camera at the world and hear it described. Speech is transcribed into captions in real time in more and more languages. Text is simplified for readers with intellectual disabilities. Voices are synthesized for those who have lost their own. A person who can move only their eye can write, work, and publish. These are not prototypes in laboratories. They are in the market today, are often at the price of an ordinary telephone. For the first time in history, the marginal cost of making information accessible is approaching zero. And yet, the and yet as well as I do. At the very same moment, new barriers are being built at unprecedented speed. Essential services, banking, government benefits, railway tickets, examinations, healthcare are moving to digital-only channels that many cannot use. Identity systems demand that you blink at a camera. Defeating persons who are blind or have facial differences. Artificial intelligence is trained on data in which we are underrepresented or misrepresented, and then makes decisions about our employment, our credit, our benefits. An inaccessible paper form excluded us one office at a time. An inaccessible digital platform excludes us a nation at a time at the speed of software development. This is why the development in Indian law in the last 2 years deserve the world's attention. And I want to salute the Indian advocates. Several of them past speakers in the lecture series whose dedication and advocacy produced them. In November 2024, in the Rajiv Raturi case, the Supreme Court of India held that accessibility standards under the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act must be mandatory, not aspirational, a floor below which no service may fall. And in 2025, in the judgments on accessible digital KYC, the Supreme Court declared that the right to digital access is an intrinsic component of the right to life and liberty under Article 21 of the Constitution. Think about what that means. The highest court of the world's largest democracy has said that in the digital age, digital access is not a convenience. It is life itself. Meanwhile, the European Accessibility Act has, since 2025, made accessibility a binding condition of the European market for digital products and services. The legal architecture of the digital age is being rebuilt around the accessibility, and it is being rebuilt because persons with disabilities went to court, to parliament, and to the standards bodies and demanded it. But law, like standards, is necessary and not sufficient. Every one of these instruments will be implemented well or badly, depending on who is in the room when the systems are designed. And who is in the room turns out to be a harder question than we sometimes admit. Let me speak honestly about tension inside our own movement. The tension between universal design and assistive technology optimized for one particular disability and the related, more delicate tensions of representation. Consider sign language. The legal recognition of national sign languages demanded by the CRPD is a historical victory. It brings public funding, the development and spread of a standard national sign languages, and the right of deaf children to receive basic education in sign. I celebrate this without reservation, but look at what can happen in implementation. In some countries, particularly I observe in the developing world, the association of those who use the national standard sign language as their first language comes to be treated as the sole representative of all persons with hearing disabilities. Yet, the great majority of persons with hearing disabilities are hard of hearing or late deafened people who are not fluent in sign. They cannot take part in the sign-based communications of the very organization deemed to speak for them. And so their first demand, captioning, quietly slips down the national agenda. Nobody intended this outcome. It even contradicts the bilingual philosophy that the World Federation of the Deaf itself advocates. The lesson is that the criterion of organizations of persons with disabilities is necessary but not sufficient. The emerging international trend rightly asks for more organizations led by the full diversity of the persons concerned and accountable to all of them. The representation, in other words, must itself be universally designed. Braille shows us some contradictive path. Today, a well-structured accessible publication, a DAISY or EPUB document, combined with a screen reader or playback application, gives a Braille reader navigation, storage, and search that paper Braille could never offer. And the very same same file drives synthetic speech, large print, and refreshable Braille display. Reading and writing in Braille has not been displaced by universal design. It is being realized within it. The specific and the universal are not enemies. If the platform is designed for diversity from the beginning, can we achieve the same for sign languages? That is the purpose of a research and development effort my colleagues and I are now pursuing, which we call the Sign Sync EPUB project. The vision is to bring synchronized sign language into the mainstream accessible publishing platform so that a single standard publication can present text, audio, images, and sign language video in synchronization, just as DAISY synchronized text and audio 30 years ago. A deaf child could then read the same textbook as every other child in sign language and written language together. Through bilingual literacy, a hard of hearing reader could follow the same publication through text and captions, and all of it would be searchable, navigable, and preservable. Our method follows the lesson of this whole lecture. First, to confirm the necessity and effectiveness of such a platform with deaf and hard of hearing communities themselves. Second, to define precisely the gap between this vision and today's standards. Third, to build upon the seeds that already exists in EPUB and W3C synchronized media standards, undertaking new development only where it is truly needed, with sign language users and other persons with hearing disabilities participating as co-developers from the first day. If we succeed, the platform that is ending the book famine for blind readers will begin to end its for deaf readers as well. And one more tension between the universal and the specific will be resolved in the only way it ever is, by the leadership of all people concerned. Which brings me to my conclusion. What is our role now? I'll answer with 5 concrete propositions. First, persons with disabilities must be present in the engine room of the technology as engineers, designers, product managers, data scientists, and entrepreneurs, not only as consultants and testers. I say especially to the young persons with disabilities of India, a nation that supplies the world with software talent. The accessibility of the next generation of technology will be decided in rooms you can be in. Study science and technology. Join the companies, found the companies. Your lived experience is not a limitation to be overcome. It is rare and precious engineering knowledge that no non-disabled colleagues can replicate. Second, our organizations must sit in the standard bodies, the W3C, the ISO, the national standards institutions, the committee drafting rules under the PWD Act and its successors. Standards are where universal design is actually written. DAISY succeeded because organizations of users govern the standard. The model must be repeated for artificial intelligence, for digital identity, for smart cities, for every platform on which daily life now depends. And participation must be resourced. Accessibility of the meetings themselves, funding for DPO experts, capacity building, because a seat set the table is meaningless if you cannot afford to sit in it. Third, procurement is power. Governments and institutions should refuse to buy what all citizens cannot use. If public money speaks with one voice. No accessibility, no contract. The market will learn universal design with remarkable speed. Fourth, universal design must be born, not bolted on. Every product should be accessible on the day of release, tested before release by persons with disabilities who are paid for this expertise. Retrofitting is the most expensive and least dignified way to achieve accessibility. And in disasters, as we have seen, retrofitting arrives too late. Fifth, and finally, leave no one behind. Within our own movement, universal design in the digital age must reach the women with disabilities in a rural village, the person with an intellectual disability, the person with psychosocial disabilities, deaf-blind persons, indigenous persons with disabilities, those whom even our own advocacy sometimes forgets, and whom SMRC, to its great credit, has always placed at the center, from women with disabilities to disabilities inclusive climate action. The digital divide runs not only between disabled and non-disabled, but a long line of gender, poverty, language, and geography. A universal design that stops at the city limit is not universal. Ladies and gentlemen, let me close where I began, with Ashok Hans and with the vow taken in the first of these lectures 16 years ago tonight. Ashok Hans believed that persons with disabilities must shape their own destinies. In his lifetime, that conviction built an institution in Bhubaneswar. In the years since, the same conviction, held by thousands of advocates in India and around the world, has built treaties, laws, standards, and technologies. The talking book that navigates like a print book, the treaty that lets it cross borders, and the constitutional rights to digital access, the evacuation led by those once written off as helpless. None of these was a gift. Everyone was designed, demanded, and built with persons with disabilities leading. That is the role of persons with disabilities in the development of universal design in the digital age. Not recipients, not afterthoughts, but architects. So let us renew Monsu's vow of 2010 in the language of our decade, that we will move from digital darkness to digital light, from exclusion at the speed of software to inclusion by design, and that we will build with our own hands, our own code, and our own leadership an information society that is rights-based, barrier-free, and inclusive for all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Hiroshi. Extremely comprehensive history you've taken us through the last 16 years, and the fact that persons with disabilities are now the actors and not the recipients, and they're not to be left out in any situations. Extremely well documented, and from the beginning of the article on Article 2 of the Convention on Universal Design, and I think Article 9 is on accessibility, not only in buildings, but also information and technology. Gone through how during the emergency situations, persons with disabilities, they're well-trained and well-prepared, are probably safer than people who are not well-versed in the emergency situation through different multimedia formats. I think you have taken us through a very long journey, very detailed journey of how persons with disabilities can work along with everybody, and the developed environment is going to be inclusive, a barrier-free and digitally accessible environment for us all. I think, thank you for that. I think I'll leave it to Asha. I think she's going to have some concluding remarks as well. Asha, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Hiroshi. It was a really extensive talk which covered so many new things that I had not even thought of for a long time. I've known both of you for so long, but still, it takes us time to come to know new things. Every time we talk, we come up with new things. And I like your ideas that when you said that persons with disability must be present in the engine room, that it is they who must make everything, they must create everything, and it all depends on your lived experience. I think these are such important things that we have to keep repeating again and again, because especially with governments, with bureaucrats, and with people, because it is the person who, I had a friend who used to say, the person knows when the shoe pinches, it's not anyone else, you know it. So this is what happens, and I'm so glad that today you brought so many new things into our arena, which will become this part of the discourse on accessibility. And I'm really thankful to both of you for being here with us. And I'm sure that the people who have come here, large number of people who are here today, have benefited from this talk. And especially, I'm sure that the young people who are here. I also agree that, the problem with us in terms of sign language also is to get people who come in and know sign language. When we go out for a meeting, sometimes we just don't get people who have sign language skills. So it's still, something that is still being developed. And I think we need to pay a lot more attention than we are paying to that. There's been a lot of thank yous for you. Someone has asked, Hiroshi, there's one question. Please elaborate on the use of the DAISY model for application regarding AI and digital identity. Yuva-san.
Yeah. Can I respond?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's a very important and strategic question. And we have to investigate the current situation and the gap between our the requirements and the reality. So it's broad, and mainly because the inside of the AI system is not open. So the secret has been the characteristics of the current AI designing. So it requires a lot of work to identify clearly the what should be done for the open development of AI. but definitely it is one of the most critical issues that we are facing in next few years. So I want to learn from the reality and from the collaborators of disability community to identify what we can do, what we should do.
Thank you, Hiroshi. And Joseph, would you like to say any few words, or shall we close?
Yes, I think very quickly, I think Hiroshi has taken us through a very comprehensive of history and showed us how technology can really help through communication and information for everybody. And I think he gave many good examples of how things can be done. And I like the way he's got the 5 different recommendations, if you like, how persons with disabilities should be a part of the team rather than they are an asset rather than a liability, and the use of standards that we don't do enough of that. We have standards, but how do we make use of them and mandate them into our everyday application of things. Procurement is very interesting. That government, I think a lot of European countries are actually having that any procurement of government or public contracts must have some sort of inclusion of universal design incorporated into that. And then universal design must be incorporated in all products. That's it's a dream that I have also, Hiroshi, but it's going to be a longish road. I think universal design has been in existence for almost 30 years, and that's just beginning to be aware by a lot of nations and people how a product, a service, an environment should be universally designed for everybody in order, benefits most of everybody. And the last comment you made is that we should leave no one behind, and that in a way that we should go from digital darkness to digital brightness to light, and that's the way we should be going. And conclusion is thank you, Dr. Ashok, for hosting this particular lecture. Thank you, Hiroshi, for providing the comprehensive and very detailed presentation of how we're doing and what direction we should be taking. So just like to thank you all very much for your attention, attendance, and please communicate with us either through Dr. Ashok or through the RI Asia Pacific Network. And I'm sure with our collaboration, with our collective input, we're going to make this particular region more accessible, more equal, and more inclusive for everybody. So thank you, Dr. Ashok.
Thank you, both of you. We'll be working now together for the next 2 years. I'm sure that there'll be a lot of changes that we will see in the Asia Pacific region, especially for those people who have been here today to come in. There are a number of people from Africa, from Asia, and we also have a board member, Mr. Ashok Sar, Dr. Professor Ashok Sar is also there. So it was good to have you, Hiroshi, and to look into all those new things that you brought into our conversation that we are having with persons with disabilities. And I'm sure that for the next 1 year, we'll be taking up all those issues that you have raised as one of the talking points among the disability community. Thank you very much, all of you who are here. You are and looking forward to keeping in touch with you for the next lecture that we will have next time. And thank you, Hiroshi, so much again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I think we'll close the session now, Asha.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all. And I hope to see you next time. And let's be in touch and let's work together. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And thank you everyone for being here today. so many people.